at the adaptation of some of these newer tools are massive. And the Monster, the six-figure jobs, Workopolis, and Dice, they still, and the newspaper, they still have their purposes. And certainly, I'm not discounting that they don't drive value, but it's also very much a one-to-many approach, where we're seeing here, obviously, that we've got stats now that show us that just over 60% of Canadians between the ages of 15 and 44 have a Facebook profile. So there's a massive shift in how, as your organization is attracting this generation of workers, you need to really rethink how you're going about advertising and sourcing. And in particular, you need to get on Facebook. You need to embrace Facebook internally as an organization. You need to embrace LinkedIn. I think the job boards still will always have a place, but the piece here that's becoming very evident is we're finding this age group doesn't, if you even go down, it was funny, I was at a barbecue last weekend with my cousins, and one of which was, she's 13 years old. And I asked her, I said, how do you guys, do you have a Hotmail account? And she looked at me like I was a dinosaur, the fact that I was referencing Hotmail, because no one's got Hotmail anymore. There's no new Hotmail accounts getting started up. And I asked her, what do you use for email? And it's all Facebook. And this is consistent. I said, well, do you know anybody? Is there anybody that you know that doesn't have a Facebook profile? And she said no. And this is a girl who's actively involved on the volleyball team, basketball teams, social life, and everything. And she couldn't think of one person in her entire network that doesn't have a Facebook profile. So there's a massive shift here, obviously, guys, that I think obviously needs to be embraced, but in particular is the messaging through these tools. Even if a resume you look at a resume on a database from 2 years ago, the chances are they're not frequently using Hotmail. And all the conversations that I've had, and even tools like that, is no one's really using it anymore. I've got a Hotmail account. I haven't checked it for almost 2 years. Anyhow, but maybe I'll pass it back to Corey here, just specifically on this stat in the slide.
Great, thanks, Ken. Great story there. It just actually made me remember I was asking my niece, who's 9 years old, playing around with her and asking her how many reindeer she thinks there are up in the north, and she says, I don't know, why don't you Google it? So anyway, this slide here says 86% of Gen Ys use the internet and job boards as tools and job searches. So just to reinforce what Candace says, there's a lot more tools out there now that this generation is connected to and are using them at a greater rate. This slide here is particularly fascinating because if you look at this chart, you've got age across the top in bold, 15 to 17, 18 to 24, and so on and so forth. And we just basically boxed out Gen Y essentially up to that 18 to 24. I guess 27, 28 is the oldest they are now. So what's interesting is you look at the difference between 35 to 44 and what's in the red box, and you'll see that there's a fairly distinct change between the 15 and 17-year-olds and the 35 to 44-year-olds. 77% are send or receive instant messages versus 53. 70% send or receive text messages using the mobile phone, 70 to 53%. And participating in social networking websites, 76% versus 38. And another very interesting component to this slide is actually sending or reading email, that 99% of 35 to 44-year-olds send or receive email, but only 94% of 15 to 17-year-olds send or receive email. And that's because they are migrating away from traditional emails like Hotmail and Yahoo over to Facebook and other social networks where a contemporary email address isn't really being used. So in terms of advertising and sourcing, how are you positioning your organization? We all have to put a company overview out. We all have responsibilities and requirements, but how do you market your jobs? Cookie cutter job descriptions don't really attract the best candidates. They need to be intrigued. They need to see visuals. Ideally, they could see a video on YouTube of your organization. There might be a blog out there that can give them more information from your employees, as an example. So from an advertising and sourcing perspective, it's not just the traditional job ad that's going to do it. You've got to go past that. Now, this is an example, and by all means, I don't want. Yeah, actually just want to say that this is an example of where you can have a job ad. Although this is a little bit text heavy, some of the language is a bit more funky. It does have a Facebook link onto it, so you can actually make sure that an individual could take that job if they see it, and it's not for them, but it might be for someone else. They could share that on their Facebook profile. This slide here in front of you, advertising and sourcing for a talent acquisition specialist, you can see that some of the language that we're using here is a little bit more descriptive in nature. It highlights things around thinking strategically, thinking creatively, researching new techniques, implementing ideas, thinking differently, and applying your innovative initiative to your working environment. And these are some of the cultural big switches that really turn the lights on for Gen Y, and it's important to highlight those when you're initially trying to equip someone to come into the organization.
Something I want to say just around creative job descriptions, Jeff, if you can just go back one slide. If you're going to go out and spend $300, $400, or $500 on a job board and copy and paste the job description that you have from 1989 for a marketing manager in, it's really wasting that money. And I think what we're seeing here is there's a massive the idea of consumer marketing is being heavily embedded within recruitment advertising now, and you know these major advertising mediums still work very well, but the critical piece is take time to really think about who your ideal candidate is and writing copyright and writing content that's actually going to speak to them. A 23-year-old top-notch recent grad is not going to be interested in a job description that's got 45 bullets on it. And I know there isn't probably anybody in the call that's not guilty of doing that at least once, right? Where we take the job description, copy and paste it. It's easy just to drop that one up. Yet if we spent an hour to go rewrite that job description and really think about what's the language that's going to very specifically speak to that individual, that's what I think what you need to do. And there's an expectation. I mean, even an example here is from an advertising perspective, we could choose internally to have a lot of different titles for a recruiter. We choose talent acquisition specialist because it sounds cool. I know that's funny, but it's essentially a good representation of the job. But this age group and these individuals care about what their job title says in their Facebook profile. They care about what they go tell other people. What do? I'm a talent acquisition specialist. Cool, right? That's tell me more about that. And there's a sense of pride in that. And I think that links back to advertising. I had a conversation with one client recently, and they said, Cam, we just cannot find marketing analysts. And I said, well, why? And he's like, well, it's a tough market. And I said, what's the job title? And he said something that was like computer or consumer data analysis specialist or something like that, right? And he wanted a marketing specialist. Everyone that I know in marketing that is not going to take a job, if they're good in marketing, they're not going to take a job that probably doesn't have marketing in the job title. I know it maybe sound funny, but the actual act of consumer marketing, Gen Y is a hell of a lot smarter than Gen X and anyone before that, as far as they know when they're being spammed, they know when they're being marketed to, and they know when they're being poorly marketed to. But they also have huge respect for good advertising. And I think taking that principle and taking the consumer marketing approach into the way you advertise your jobs is a very critical component to all this, because you'll have a very tough time attracting good, smart young people with poorly written advertisement if that's a core channel that you're using.
Great, Cam. Thanks. So this is an example. Van City, we don't work with Van City directly, but we just wanted to take this as an example to show you how they've changed some of their focus. You can look what the company offers. It's not just another company. Right there on the screen, there's messages that are very contemporary in our socio-political context. Everything we hear about every single day around innovation, sustainability, culture, being best of class and being green, screams out to anyone looking at this particular career site. So, the environmental aspects of an organization, the people aspects, the focus on growth, the focus on positive social impact, all those elements are clearly marketed here. Now, Van City as a credit union has all the same functions as any other credit union, or just to a high level of similarity, banks, and therefore there will be a lot of bureaucracy, there will be large teams, there will be changes, there will be reorganizations, and all the things that you'd expect to get in an organization. But from a marketing perspective, it's very smart to bring through some of the things that your organization is recognized for.
Just go back to that slide for a sec. Why I like this approach so much, and why it's, in my opinion, it's brilliant, is they're very specifically talking to people, and they've obviously done some profiling on what makes good employees, but they've probably recognized that through profiling that people that care about the environment and care about those types of things make great employees. So why try to be everything to everybody? And what they've done here, which is brilliant, is they've targeted a subset of the population who care about green, right? Who care about sustainability, that care about what we're seeing more and more so that are characteristics of Gen Y and Gen X. So I think this is an extremely intelligent approach, because I've seen a lot of very flashy, great-looking careers websites, but it really doesn't speak to anybody particular. And what I think is brilliant about this, and I'm making some assumptions, but they've probably done some kind of behavioral or cultural assessments and found that their top performers really care and they stick around with Van C because of the fact that they're green. I just think it's a really brilliant move. You're never going to get the entire market. They just want ones that really care about this stuff and they know they can deliver that, which to me, I mean, this is a very strong stance from an employment branding perspective. And again, some people are going to care about it, some people that don't. What's beautiful about it is they don't care about the ones that don't care about the fact that they're green, because they know that they're probably not going to be the best employee. So there's a whole bunch of marketing embedded in this that I just think is brilliant and a really smart approach to employment branding.
This slide here is interesting. This is sort of getting into how you communicate what your company offers. Why is your organization great? Do you offer 3 weeks vacation, 15 days? Or do you offer 15 days, 12 days of vacation and 3 personal care days? Do you offer discounts on the products that you market? Is your organization doing a quarterly event supporting a charity or a social need? Can employees telecommute? Is there an opportunity to spend an afternoon at home or work from a different location, down at the Waves coffee shop, for example? What's the age of your team? How many people are in your organization? What's the opportunity for lateral skill growth or upward mobility in the organization? Is there going to be challenge in the job? Is the organization going through a lot of change? Is it going through a growth spurt? What's the prospect of your organization from a sales perspective over the next 3 to 5 years? What is the total rewards package? Lay it all out. I think one of the things, and this will be talked about in the slide coming up, is that often it's sort of salary and title that are the major components that are discussed, but it's the total reward package that's really important to Gen Y. And because this generation is very group oriented in terms of how they work, it's necessary to consider in your organization having a group oriented environment, whether that's for side project groups or whether that's actually part of how you organize your teams. So this slide here, where are you sourcing candidates? Essentially, we want to say, are you sourcing them off Monster? You should stop only sourcing from Monster. One Gen Y candidate through the technology they love to use every single day. They know hundreds of other people like themselves, and all for very little, you can actually have individuals market your job ads to people that they have in their own Facebook or LinkedIn profiles. So, why change? And I think the numbers here are pretty obvious, and Cam mentioned this earlier. Almost all Gen Ys have a computer and a cell phone, so you know that they're very connected. Broadband is I think the highest rate, one of the highest rates in the world in Canada specifically. What's interesting here is about 44% of these individuals are reading blogs, which is huge, and 75% of college students have a Facebook account. These people keep in touch with one another, and it's often not through voice but by technology. This is just a little bit of a fun slide here. You see the use of the scripture that the young female is sending over to the young male, and then you've got your dude on the left doesn't understand a word the young people say these days, which is hilarious